Well, welcome everybody to the Coffee Cup Counselor podcast. This is our first. My name is Phil Smith. I am the mental health coach director here at AACC, the American Association for Christian Counselors. And I've got John.
Yes, that's me. This is exciting, Phil. This is the very first ever coffee cup counseling.
I have been looking forward to this for months.
Do you have a coffee cup? That's the question.
You know what?
I saw. Okay. The Alaska one.
Yeah. John and I went to Alaska this summer.
We did. It was fantastic.
Caught some fish, had a great time together.
I fell into the water. Did what we're not supposed to do. Every instruction about the trip says, whatever you do, do not fall in above your waders. And that's exactly what I did.
You went in
pretty quickly.
You went in above your waders. You went in above your head.
I filled my waders with water.
And it was cold out there that day, wasn't it?
Cold.
It was so cold.
And I think everybody's trying not to laugh.
No, I think we were all pretty concerned because that was deep. It was over your head.
It was funny. It was like
you're 6.
I'm 6'2", and on the one side of the raft, it was like 3 inches deep.
Yep.
And then I just I'm gonna get out of the boat.
Oh,
And these by the way, these rafts are tiny. They're little tiny rafts. I'm a large man.
The fact that you could be 3 inches on the right side and then 7 feet on the left side,
but that's Alaska. Impressive. Alaska is a dangerous place.
It was a good time
for dangerous people. We were men. We were men.
We were men, and we were cold too.
And you brought back a manly coffee cup.
I did. That was my souvenir. That was a great trip. Really had a great time. And listen, John, really thank you for being on the Coffee Cup Counselor for our first run. And we're here at the Coffee Cup Counselor podcast. We're going to be sharing a lot of stories, a lot of testimonies, some tools. We'll have counselors. Sometimes we'll have people telling stories about how God had changed their life through the church and through counseling ministries, recovery ministries. And so, John, you are a licensed clinical social worker.
Yes, sir. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, ordained pastor, and founded a ministry called Recovery Alive, which is Christ-centered 12-step ministry. And locally in Selma, North Carolina at Temple City Church, we have anywhere from 350 to 400 people every Friday night show up, teenagers, kids, adults. And we do recovery, which
I think you're being modest. I think it's more like 500 or 600 people.
Those are the Baptist numbers.
Those are the Baptist. Well, I was noticing in Selma, North Carolina, the population is 6,000 people. And if you can have 500 or 600 people come to your church on a Friday night, you're getting 10% of your town.
Yeah, man. And we say it's the best place to be on a Friday night. It really is, man. We do a really great worship service, and we have really good food. We have a dinner before we start. 6 o'clock, we do our dinner.
Yep.
But what the real heart of our ministry is change lives. People's lives are actually changing. We're going to have on the podcast some of those change lives, but folks who struggle with pretty heavy addiction, depression, anxiety, anger, relationship issues, we're seeing them find hope and freedom through the recovery process. And I'm also a counselor at 180 Counseling. I do individual and family counseling, and a great combination of treatment modalities is if somebody can do individual counseling and then also have a support system in place and a process of recovery. That's kind of the gold standard, along with possibly a really good psychiatrist to prescribe medication. And so I'm just happy that I get to provide those things. And it's cool that we get to do it inside the church. That's what's super cool.
You know, I've been to a few of your programs, and they are fascinating how many people show up. And you just walk around, it's Friday night.
Yeah.
It's Friday night. And you've got this many folks coming out for in some cases, it is a service.
Oh, yeah.
And then they do break off into groups. But what made you want to do what you're doing?
Well, so to be completely honest, when I was early on in my career working as a social worker, I started volunteering at my local church, doing things like the food pantry. I worked for Child Protective Services in Delaware, and I was a treatment worker. So an investigation would happen, and then I would come in later and provide some counseling services to the family. And during that time, some of that volunteer work I was doing at the church, the pastor came to me and handed me a box of curriculum for doing recovery within the church. And my first response was, absolutely, I'd love to help all of those people. So audio, I'm doing the air quotes. Okay.
Yeah, I've said it.
I'm going to help all those people. And what really took me to the next level so that, we can, and this is true, and anybody who wants to start a recovery program, is that I had to transition from saying that I've got to help all those people to understanding that I am one of those people, that all of us struggle with something. And so when that started to kind of make sense to me through some struggles in my own life, and I started working the recovery process, we saw the ministry really blossom and grow through 3 ministries that I've started. I started one in Delaware, actually 2 in West Virginia, and now 1 here in North Carolina. Those ministries grow because first and foremost, though I lead recovery, I need recovery. And so 7 years ago, started a ministry in Selma, North Carolina. And like you said, it's not a huge metropolitan area.
No, very, very rural.
Yeah.
The rural parts of North Carolina out there on the kind of close to the Piedmont, I guess you would say.
Yeah, southeast of Raleigh.
Yep.
And of course, the church is fantastic. The pastoral support that we have there is pivotal and extremely important for making sure that if you have a ministry like that, that your leadership is behind it. That's a huge part of the secret of why this thing works, is that the pastor has our pastor, Rodney Pierce, he's got a reputation in our community as someone who is full of integrity and character and is just a fantastic pastor. But he's also known as someone who provides for the needs of the community through not only mental health and substance abuse issues with recovery. We have a dream center there, helping out women in domestic violence situations. So it's really good to have the culture of a church that's ready not only to take on a ministry financially or take on a ministry with a yes vote, but also a church that will accept and acknowledge that we're all sinners in need of a savior. And so the culture was already there in the church, that people were like, sometimes the church can kind of turn its nose up at folks who come in and are dealing with
you're
that
exactly stuff. Right. I think what you do that's unique, and because I've gone through your program, is if someone's going to be a volunteer or they're going to work in the ministry, if they're going to be a part of the Recovery Live ministry, you don't allow them to be in a position where they can look at as those people, because you make them go through the recovery steps. Right.
Yeah. So we have a curriculum called Recovery Live Handbook, and everybody's pathway to leadership starts by themselves working through the Recovery Alive Handbook curriculum through what we call process groups. And kind of how we describe it, Phil, is we don't want people to be travel agents.
Okay.
We want them to be tour guides. Travel agents can tell you, hey, I can tell you how to get to Hawaii. I can, book your ticket and all that kind of stuff. But a tour guide says, I've been there before. I can meet you there and I can show you all the paths that I've taken, of some of the mistakes I've made. And so travel agents are not as helpful in really traveling this road. People can say, hey, you really need this program. And you say, well, did you do it? And they're like, well, no, but it's not as impactful as somebody said. It worked. It worked for me. It's like that old hair club commercial. Phil, no offense. The old hair club commercial where, I'm not just the president, I'm a customer basically. So we're all satisfied customers in recovery. We've all been through it. It's been helpful to us. And
so you've had people who've gone through it who would say in a normal conversation, they're healthy mentally, they're healthy, right? They're fine. I probably have said it myself. Oh, I don't really need anything that this would offer. So,
right.
But I'll just take it to go along. But then as they get into those programs, they start to realize maybe there is something about this that applies to me.
Yeah. And that's the scriptural reality, that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, justified freely by his grace. That all have sinned. Anyone who says they're without sin, they're a liar. That you have this approach to Christianity so that God's power is made perfect, not in our strength, but in our weakness.
Yeah.
And we fight against kind of the American ethic of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And of course, there's good pieces to that. You want to have a good work ethic, that faith without works is dead. But ultimately, the idea is that how we come to Jesus is dependent. How we come to Jesus, not at first, but for always, is in a state of surrender, in a state of, I need grace, that I can't do this on my own. And why that's such a powerful concept to people who are in addiction or depression or anxiety is because they're desperate, and desperation plus faith equals recovery. When people are desperate, they find any way they can to get what they need. And when they find Christ, it's there's nothing like it. When people who are in need of a savior because of their addiction, because of a major mental health issue, because of relationship issues, they come crawling to the cross. And when Jesus meets them there, you can't get them to shut up about what God's doing in their life. You can't get, because because he keeps his promises. He follows through with what he says. Drugs weren't able to do that. Relationships weren't able to do that. Medication and by itself can't do that. So when you get to Jesus, he keeps his promises, and people go, it works. And I want to tell everybody about it.
That I've witnessed that.
Yeah.
But so there's so many different programs out there. There's AA. There's a lot of recovery programs, mental health programs out there. Why is it important? What would you say to someone that says, well, why is it so important that you do mental health ministry or an addiction recovery ministry in your church? Why is it important that the church be behind this?
Yeah, well, I want to think about a scenario. It's been really helpful to have this conversation, and the AACC has been great about it with the mental health coaching program to really start these conversations. But just imagine that somebody who's struggling with schizophrenia walks into a local church and says, hey, I'm hearing voices, or somebody who's a heroin addict, and they walk in the church and say, hey man, I just used, what does a secretary at a church do in response? Or what does a pastor do in response? If, somebody's listening right now, and you say, what would your church do if somebody in that situation walks up to the counter and says, hey, what can you guys do for me? A lot of churches might go to the food pantry and say, hey, we got some food if you need some. You might tell them, come to church on Sunday. And that's great. But a lot of times what ends up happening is they get referred to a local secular agency. Or, hey, sometimes we might even call the police. And so what if every church on every corner had an answer? Every time we were confronted with somebody with a major substance abuse issue or a major mental health issue, what if the church said, I know exactly how to respond to you. I'm glad you're here. And we have right now somebody, a mental health coach, who can connect with you and get you to a Christian therapist, into Christian recovery, a Christian rehabilitation center, a Christian psychiatrist. And I can work with you, do some coaching with you. And we have a recovery program right here on campus. Like, we could be the urgent care center for mental health and substance use, because there's a church on every corner. What if every church on every church corner could say, yep, we've got a solution for that? It would whole communities would be changed for the glory of God. And so I think that's what we have to have. The church has to have a response, because we tell people, come, all who are weary and heavy laden, will give you rest. That's Jesus's promise. We tell people we've got the answer, and his name is Jesus, but people come looking for an answer. And a lot of times we're like, I don't know what to do. And
Here, read this track. Or come to our service Sunday morning at 9 and 11, and you get to hear what the pastor is talking about.
And pray more and read the Bible more. And we always talk about, like, of course, that's extremely beneficial. But I love the story of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts, when, Philip is brought before this eunuch, and the eunuch is in his chariot, and he's reading Isaiah 53, but he doesn't know what he's reading. And Philip kind of asks him, he says, what are you reading? What's it about? And the eunuch is like, how can I understand it if nobody will explain it to me? He's got the Bible right in front of him. He's got the scripture that can tell him who the Savior is, but he's stuck because he doesn't have somebody to kind of walk him through what the gospel looks like. And so what Luke says in Acts is he says that Philip gets into the chariot with him, right? He meets him where he is, sits with him in the chariot, and explains Isaiah 53 is about the Savior, Jesus Christ. And he tells him about Jesus and what happened to him. And at the end of it, the Ethiopian eunuch says, what prevents me from being baptized right now?
Yeah.
And so it's a pretty
He's
cool.
not playing games, is he?
Yeah. So in Recovery Live, we say you need 3 P's when you're trying to recover. And the first P is a power greater than yourself, Jesus Christ. The second P is people, safe and supportive people. And then we need a process, because you can't have progress really without process. Step 1 is I admit that I am powerless and my life's unmanageable. I need help. Well, now what? Now we say, well, I believe there's a power greater than myself who can restore me. Step 3 is I turn my life and will over to Jesus Christ. And then there's the discipleship piece, doing an inventory, working on relationships with other people. And that's the crux of recovery. And then service. And it's simple, right? Because Jesus was asked, what are the 2 greatest commandments? Phil, love God, love other people. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to work on our relationship with God first, and then work with our relationship with other people, because it's really hard to recover. It's really hard to do life without safe and supportive relationships. And so that's the crux of what our recovery program is.
So I've got to imagine, because I've been there, that you're always paranoid. I want to help. I want to listen. I want to be involved. I care, but I've got to imagine I'm not the only person out there who feels like, I don't think you're a licensed counselor. You've had the training, not only in experience. My background is construction. My background is nursing, or my background is, there's a lot of people I think like me in the church. The pews are full of people who are just normal people, and they say, man, I would love to help. I'm just afraid I'll make it worse. I want to help. I don't know where to start. You're a counselor. You're experienced in this. You've been educated on this, but I don't want to make it worse. Or, there's a lot of other reasons, it gets a little bit messy, afraid to, give these people my number that they would say or something. What do you say to people who just don't feel like they're good, they would be good at it, or they're afraid that they're just going to make it worse by
Good question.
by getting involved?
Yeah, I'd say 2 things. Do you have a favorite restaurant? What's your favorite restaurant, Phil, in the lovely Lynchburg area?
I'm a big Mexican fan around here. La Correda's whenever I get a chance.
How did you find out about it?
I don't even remember.
You probably were told by somebody who ate there.
It said, yeah, that's
right.
That's exactly right.
And so, like, I hate to say I'm a foodie, but I love to go to like new restaurants, and I usually learn about new restaurants because somebody will say, hey, you got to try this place, right?
Oh, we did that in Orlando.
Right.
We went to some place.
Oh, that was good.
It was so good.
What was the name of that? That was incredible.
It was so expensive. We had to go back the next night. It was so,
it was so good.
It was so good, and it was so expensive.
We ate so much food, though. That was why it was so expensive. We ate like 14 meals for 2 people.
Back the next night. It was so good.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes. So we learned about that from somebody. And so what I would say first is that now I'm hungry. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Yes. Taste and see that the Lord is good. The first thing I would tell anybody is, like, somebody who recommends a restaurant, they're not a cook, they're not a chef, they're not a person who owns a restaurant. They don't know about the restaurant business, but they tried the food and they said, I know it is really good. You need to come here and check this out. And so the first thing I'd say is, if you have tasted recovery, if you've seen that the Lord is good, then you are qualified. It's just like the man who Jesus healed from blindness. He goes, they're drilling him. They want him to be an expert. Whose authority, did you get this healing, whatever. And he goes, guys, I don't know. He says, here's what I do know. Once I was blind, and now I see. That's all I know. And that's enough, right? So I'd say, first of all, is if you receive this healing yourself, you are highly qualified to let other people know that it works, because it worked for you. The second thing I would say is this, is that in my years as a counselor, as a therapist, I've ran therapeutic groups, I've worked at federal probation programs. I've worked in prisons. I've worked in hospitals. I've worked in schools. I'm going to tell you the thing that people want more than anything else, and even studies will tell you this, is they want to know that you care, that you're listening, and that they matter. You know, what they're saying matters to you. We do this thing called love, listen, understand, validate when we're working through relationships. Listen, understand, and validate. If you can do those things, do those listening skills. Listening is just having a posture that what you're saying to me with my body language matters. You're leaned forward, your eye contact, you know, your posture is open. You're not interrupting. You're not trying to fix that person. You're just there to listen. Understanding is doing that feedback, which I know is very kind of typical counselor language. Is here's what I heard you say. You repeat back what that person says, and you say, "Is that right? Did I get that right?" Just so you make sure you understand. And then validating. Validation is huge because you don't even have to agree with somebody to validate them. You can tell somebody, "Hey, it makes sense to me that you're using right now. You don't really have any other solution." You're not agreeing that that's a good thing for them to be doing, but you can, instead of being like, "You got to stop using." Well, of course they know that, you know,
that's not new to them.
Right. You know, but it's like, "Oh, I get it, man. I get that that's a struggle for you. It makes sense to me. You're around all these folks who are using, you know, you grew up with parents who, you know, were abusive." You can validate their struggle, validate where they're coming from, validate their hurt, validate their pain. And if you can just learn how to do that, be a good listener, be there for somebody, care about somebody, man, that's not half the battle. That's like 90% of the battle. A lot of times I just want to know you care, that you're here for me. And boundaries are important, of course, but yeah, being able to just be there for people and work this process for us anyway. We give people the process to help work them through this process of recovery, and not to try to be counselors and not try to be therapists. And I love the mental health coaching program because that's a lot of the work. They're not saying you're not like a licensed therapist, but we're giving you a lot of tools that you can really meet people where they're at.
Yeah, a lot of great tools that when that, you know, Paul says, put on the whole armor of God so you be able to withstand. A lot of times we think we're putting on that armor so because we're going to go to battle, we're going to go fight, and we're going to the enemy. It's, you know, God will send those who need help your way,
right?
And you want to be prepared for that. You want to be ready. So yeah, the mental health coach program does a fantastic job at equipping you on that triage level. You know, we want you to be able to, in the moment, be able to handle those situations when they do come around. But John, I'd love for you to talk about, because I've seen it with my own eyes. You know, I admit I was born on Saturday, in church on Sunday.
Yeah.
You feel like you've been around, you know how this goes. And I get a little bit callous about things. You know, you go, "Hey, Phil, we'd really love for you to volunteer at, you know, something like the children's event." And then you show up and you're just scared to death they're going to have you pouring Kool-Aid or standing in the corner, making sure kids are in a straight line. You know, you feel like, man, I feel like I'm a little bit more equipped for this. I do. I'm speaking for myself. You know, man, I'm a little bit more equipped, a little more ready for this. But I had noted, and I get a little calloused about it. Like I'm looking for what I would in my own mind call the important work. But then I've been around the recovery program that you have, and the people that come in, they shame me with their no pride. Does that make sense? They want to work. They want to be involved in anything. Call them up to cut the grass. I'm there. You need somebody to work in the parking lot. I'm there. You need somebody to get here and just turn the heat on in the morning and run the flag up the flag. I'm here. What do you spread mulch? I'm here. And I have noticed with recovery programs, mental health programs, the people who have been impacted by it turn out to be some of the most amazing people in your church. Have you experienced that?
Yeah. So we talk about recovery as, you know, a leadership factory, and it's not a leadership factory necessarily just for our recovery program. It's a leadership factory for the church. And it's because once you have been saved from your struggle, your sin, your pain, your hurt, you get that sense of gratitude.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, a person who knows what they've been saved from, and it's in front of them all the time in recovery. We're not trying to return to a place where we're just wallowing in it, but just being reminded, like, I know what I've been saved from. John Eklund was an alcoholic very early on in my life. Like, I know God saved me from alcoholism. I know I had to struggle with codependency. My wife had an eating disorder. Those things God saved my family from. And I know that, and it's in front of me a lot because I talk about it a lot in recovery. So it's in front of me, and there's gratitude. So people who are in recovery have that gratitude. They know what they've been saved from. And then, when they work through this process of the 12 steps, the last step 12 is about giving back. You go through that process, and basically step 12 is you can't keep it unless you give it away. And Christianity says that that's true, right? Christianity says that Jesus says, abide in me and I will abide in you. He says, I am the vine, you're the branches. And if you don't do what? Produce fruit, then I'm going to cut you off. It's not just enough to be a branch tied into, I'm at church every Sunday, and I'm in that pew, and I know Jesus, and Jesus knows me, and I love him. That's not enough. Jesus says there's got to be some fruit produced. We've got to healthy things multiply.
Sure.
Healthy things generate fruit. And so, yes, I watch people in recovery become, there's that 80-20 principle. 20% of the people do 80% of the work in church. But when you have a recovery program, watch. It starts to balance out. The people in recovery show up, and pretty soon it's 60-40.
Are you listening, pastors? Are you listening to this?
And I'm just saying it because it's true. It's true for our church. It's been true in my experience, is that, when people know what they're saved from, and they have grateful people serve, I'll just say it that way.
Grateful people, they do serve. And that was one of the most amazing things to watch, people who over the course, I remember one evening, a gentleman, he'd come in, and communities rally around these types of programs. And there was a gentleman that came into the program. I was there that night, and a kid walked in. Apparently he'd gotten in trouble that day with the law about something. And the deputy was giving him a warning and letting him go, but he gave him a recovery card. So I'm gonna let you go with a warning here, but it's going to be based on you going to this recovery program tonight. And the kid was so grateful. I know he stuck around for a while. He was just so grateful that he was let go of the warning. But hey, go check out this program. And he came, and he was around for a while. I don't know what ended up happening to him, but you could see it on his whole countenance that grace had been extended to him, and he knew that he needed to be somewhere where he could get help. And that was an amazing story. And I loved him when he told that story.
Yeah.
Well, so what do you say to, I know there's a lot of people out there that want these, I think mental health ministries are the fastest growing ministries in churches right now.
Oh yeah.
There's what's happened with COVID and the pandemic, but with the lockdown and everything, it's just created a mental health crisis in the country. It really is absolutely unbelievable. So we're seeing churches that are just clamoring for these programs. What do you say to a coach out there, or somebody's just sort of that coffee cup counselor? They want to listen, they want to have a program like this in the church, and they want to go to their pastor. How do they talk to their pastor about getting a program like this without, because we've all had those churches. Pastor, we need a food pantry.
Yeah, a lot of mouths to feed in churches, right? There's a lot of mouths to feed.
6 weeks later, you can't find the person that wanted to start this ministry, and now the pastor has to do it.
That's
because
right.
They started. What do you say to those?
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot on the mental health coaching pages, man. That an individual can have a lot of passion but not have the support, right? Mm-hmm. Have a lot of passion but not have that church like vision to do this thing. And I would say it's a balance between having that competency and also having the compassion. Like, I've had people even come to me and have this incredible amount of passion to start something and do something. But when I ask them to kind of lay out their plan, or, what are they thinking? They want me to come up with it. And I think a pastor can just get overwhelmed by that and say, people can come up and say, Pastor, do you know how bad the mental health crisis is? We need to do something. And the pastor says, well, what do you suggest? And they're like, well, you're the pastor. Like, whoa.
Yeah.
Come with a plan,
common.
come with some competency,
Very
come
common.
with statistics, come with an understanding of your own community, come with some, I don't like when people come to me with a problem without at least having one solution that they would bring, to the table. So if you're going to bring an idea about like, hey, I want to get this thing started, I would say have the statistics ready. Like 107,000 people last year died of fatally overdosed on drugs. 1 in 4 folks in our congregation, statistics say, are struggling with anxiety. 50% of the men in our church are looking at pornography. 30 to 40% of our pastors are looking at pornography. Do you think that the church might need a recovery program, might need a mental health coaching program? Yes. Now, what do you think we should do? Well, the AACC has a scholarship out there where, they can get involved and get this training, through the American Association of Christian Counselors. Here's that information. I'm willing to head it up. I'm willing to work with that. I'm willing to start this program. I've got 4 or 5 people who are interested. All I need from you is a green light and maybe the credit card. And just so and I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm not to tell a pastor, this is really important. I don't want something from you. I want something for you, because a lot of pastors, I'm telling you, I've worked with hundreds of pastors, literally, in some of the national recovery ministry I've done. And pastors, for the most part, don't really feel like counseling is something that they're called to. They feel like they're called to preach.
Yeah.
Which is true. They're supposed to get up there, lead the flock, manage the church. It's a big organization. And a lot of the counseling work that they end up doing is just, it's not really in their wheelhouse. And so if you tell a pastor, I can take away 70-80% of your counseling workload, sometimes they're like, sold.
Yeah.
Sold. And so being able to go like, here's how I can do that. When somebody comes to, I love this. I think it was Dr. Stanford who said, somebody who's struggling with a mental health issue, they go into your worship team and they're struggling with a mental health issue, but nobody really catches it. They don't know quite what to do with that. And then that person may, cause some issues in there because they're untreated. And then they leave that ministry and then they go, well, let me go try this other one. And the leader of the small group ministry where this person might come into is like, well, we're struggling with this person and we don't quite know what's going on with them. And they're having some personality conflicts with people. And these 2 leaders in the church don't have any way to kind of, have that light bulb go on that says, oh, maybe this is something else. Maybe this person is just asking for help, instead of we say, oh, that person's full of drama, or that, And so anyway, I think it's just extremely important to understand that having that experience of being able to see a ministry where we call it level of care and continuum of care works within a church, not just in like a healthcare system or not just in a community, but that it can happen in the church where you can have just a mental health coach in the middle of all this, being the hub of making sure somebody's getting to the right ministry, getting to the right place. Man, I'm telling you that having that in your church just decreases a pastor's workload, decreases drama in ministries, educates everybody in the church, says, hey, if somebody's struggling with some personality stuff, it might be it might have some mental health. Susie, she's a mental health coach. Why don't we just refer her over to Susie and see what Susie can do? So, but you got to have that understanding. You got to have that information. You have to have that competency, not just the compassion. I want to help people. That's great. You got to have some competency.
That's right. The mental health coach program really does do a great job at equipping, giving you the confidence that to handle whatever God may bring your way. And ultimately you would kind of get an idea of where they're at and what they're going through. And if they need to go see a professional, schizophrenia, that's a
psychiatrist. You might need some inpatient resources, and then just the community itself being able to kind of tie in that the community knows that you exist. So we have what we call an opioid task force, which is a part of Johnston County's efforts to get services to people who are struggling with an opioid addiction. And so that that task force, just recently, we had the Attorney General of North Carolina show up, have a conversation with us about treatment and the disbursement of funds. There's these huge amounts of settlement money that's coming in for through Big Pharma. Big Pharma finally is paying for just the insanity of how they contribute to the opioid crisis. And in fact, I think even like CVS and Walmart, some of these other places who were part of that distribution process, there's some big settlement money coming in, and just being able to get together and say, what should we do with these funds? What's the best way to do that? And what if the church has a voice in those conversations?
That's right.
That we need to have a voice in those conversations, but I'm telling you, these things usually go on between government agencies, secular agencies, and the church just isn't invited.
Well,
but
the
if
church
you
is on
have
the
a
front
mental
lines.
health program or a recovery program, you're going to be involved.
In the church, they are on the front lines. Was it Barna put up 75-80% of everybody who ever went to see a professional counselor went to a church first.
Yeah, went to their pastor. Yeah.
And so why wouldn't the church be on the front lines?
That's right.
So listen, God bless you. I appreciate so much what your ministry means and what you guys are doing down there in Selma.
Well, I'm excited about this podcast, Phil.
This was
We're going to have some more guests on here. We're
detail.
going to have lots of
Ooh.
good information. Your mental health coaching folks are in for a treat, man. There's going to be lots of tools. This is just the tip of the iceberg, and this is fun, man. I appreciate you doing this and having me on for this.
They twisted my arm to have you, so I just gave in.
Nice.
And you're gonna be with us for some of our other podcasts. We're gonna be interviewing some pastors. We've got some people that have gone through recovery, and they're some amazing stories of what God has done in their lives. So check out some of those other podcasts, and we do thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time to listen and share. And we really want to encourage you to get involved and make a difference in the mental health crisis that we're experiencing in America and in your church. But we are so excited you were with us, and hope you have a blessed day.